Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. This is the end of this season. It is all over. We have a national champion. The 2018-19 season has ended, and this is our final podcast of the year.
I've got like 800 channels, and there's not a game on any of them.
For the first time since October, that's correct. Yeah. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, up top here. We've got David Griggs and John Sleek on the top row. John Titel in the center down there, off to his sides, Matt Zakowski and Rocco Miller. I don't even know, David, where are we starting tonight?
Well, I guess we could start with, let's go right into the games.
Games. Oh, there were a couple of games, weren't there? A couple of games of minor importance, huh?
We have Joby not with us. As far as we know, he made it back.
Yes. Well, this was it. It was Final Four weekend. An incredible set of games, an overtime national championship game. You couldn't get much better than that. Our colleague Joby Fortson is a Virginia alum, cannot make it. He was there at the games, as were you, Rocco. Although I don't think were you actually at the games or just in the city?
I was in the city and did a lot of the events, and just didn't fork out the dough to go to the real games. But I did pretty much everything else you could do, so which is good. Good experience.
Well, let me start with you. Then what was it like up there in Minneapolis for the Final Four?
Well, I would highly recommend it to anybody that covers the sport to go anywhere, any year, because I got up there Wednesday morning, and that's kind of when the coaches convention gets really cooking, and all Wednesday and Thursday, pretty much the whole city was basketball related people before the fans came in. So, just being out in the lobby at the hotel I was at, and then just walking around, make a lot of connections and just strike up conversations, see a lot of familiar faces in the business. And that's a pretty cool experience and opportunity. And then Friday, I was fortunate enough to get a credential to cover the 3x3, which I think we'll talk about later in the show. But Yeah, all in all, a great experience. And then I was back yesterday and connected with Joby pregame, and the atmosphere was pretty crazy pregame and after. So great time.
Well, how about what happened on the court? And Titel, let me start with you. Let's start with those semifinals, though, especially that amazing Virginia-Auburn game with I don't think it should have been controversial, but it's being billed as a controversial finish there with the foul
call.
It
was controversial.
No, it was a foul. It was clearly a foul. But
oh, no, that wasn't.
Okay.
The double dribble was controversial.
It's a double dribble that they're going to catch one out of a million times. But go ahead, John T.
So let's start by addressing the finish. So as far as the foul, when I first saw it, I'm like, oh my God, like they're giving them the game on a bad call. After looking at it several times, I think it was the right call. And kudos to Kyle Guy for stepping up and nailing 3 in a row. That's what you want your clutch players to do, is make big shots at the end of the game to win games. He also made the 3, of course, 6 points in like 5 seconds to outscore Auburn 6-1 and almost single-handedly win the game himself. As far as the double dribble, like, I've watched this sport all my life, and to be honest, like, it didn't quickly occur to me when I saw it. I was like, oh, like, he picked it up and he's going, and they're going to foul him. Oh, my God, I hope they have one to give. When Steratore explained it, and they showed it many times, like, he was dribbling, he lost it on his own accord, he picked it up with 2 hands, and he dribbled again. So if that is what the rule is, which I think it is, then it should have been called that way. But I hope it doesn't take away from a great game, and all 4 teams, I think, were great. Auburn should not hang their head. They were this close to beating the eventual champ with one of their best players, Chuma Okeke, hurt due to the ACL tear. An amazing job by the Tigers.
Yeah, and Titel, you bring up a good point. This was a fantastic basketball game. It was two teams playing very well, playing as hard as they could in a very, very high-stakes game. I mean, much of the tournament's like that, but, I mean, this one in particular, it was back and forth, both teams making big plays, and I hate that the most indelible thing was a non-call on a double dribble. I actually did know the rule. Watching it live, I thought the ball was tipped by the defender, which is why they didn't call it. It wasn't until they showed the replay that I was like, no, the defender didn't tip it. Had he picked it up with 2 hands and not dribbled, it's not a double dribble. Had he not picked it up with 2 hands, had he just maintained his dribble or started dribbling again, not a double dribble. Had the defender tipped it, not a double dribble. But by letter of the rule, it was. Now, having said that, I don't think there should be any sort of asterisk by this game or by Virginia at all, because I just don't think that that's fair. But what a game! And in the Elite Eight and the Final Four, Virginia was down by 2 with less than 2 seconds to go, 50 feet from the basket, and won both games.
Well, they were down 2, but by the same token, they were also up 10, I think, around 5 minutes left before, I think it was Jerome that picked up his 4th foul. He was only out for 90 seconds, but that was just enough juice for Auburn to actually start their run at that point.
Right, and let me go back though to the double dribble though. You could take a look at any game that was played and find 3 dozen calls that were mistakes. It could have gone the other way during any game. This one just happened to be at the end of the game, and it was not one that was easily noticeable. It was a tough call. I'm not upset about it. I thought Auburn would win the game, and I'm not upset.
But according to a number of their fans, Auburn did win the game, though.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Let's ask Stalika about what happened in Auburn, because he was the one that noticed it. Or at least that's where I initially saw it. And you feel bad for them, but I still laughed for about an hour. It was tremendous. What happened, Stalika?
Well, what happened was, I think in real time, it probably took about a minute for them to actually review the foul. So there were a number of Auburn fans that one of their traditions whenever they win big during football or basketball season is they'll raid Toomer's Corner on campus and start toilet papering the trees. So everyone's gathering to celebrate, and about 3 minutes later, it slowly dawns on them, we lost?
And it wasn't one. It was hundreds, literally hundreds of people running out of the bars into the streets. We won. There's a guy running around with an Auburn flag. Everybody's like jumping up, and they thought they had won.
And this was not a troll job of Alabama fans either. This was a legitimate Auburn celebration that just suddenly turned.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, let's take a look at the other semifinal. Matt, let me bring you in here. That Texas Tech-Michigan State game ends up being a 10-point, a double-digit win by Texas Tech. A very impressive performance by them at start off in the semifinals.
Oh, yeah, no, that I think for the team that won, it was known for its defense, but the story of the tournament is how Texas Tech shut down some elite offenses like Michigan, Gonzaga, and Michigan State. Now, I think in this action game, this is probably the easiest game of the 3, I'd say, for them, just because personnel-wise, it's Cassius Winston and a bunch of dudes that Izzo's really coached up. But
I agree with you. I really thought that this was the preferred of the 3 teams for Texas Tech. I did a little spot on Lubbock Radio the day before the Final Four, and exactly, I really thought Texas Tech would win the game pretty much like they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
if you were to just go to a box score, for example, you see Jarrett Culver, 10 points, but when 7 of those points come in the final 2 minutes, including a back-breaking 3, he was certainly the hero for Texas Tech Saturday night.
Well, let's turn to our Virginia alum Joby to talk about the national championship game. Joby?
Well,
he's not here, is he?
It's the first time I haven't heard Joby talk. It's incredible.
Okay. Seriously though, well, Rocco, what about that championship game?
Oh, it's tremendous. Texas Tech was right there to get the win. They had, I think the crucial possession in hindsight was, well, there was 2, but I think the crucial one for Virginia was the kick out when Jerome would have had an easy layup, had the gutsy pass to kick it out for 3 to Hunter, and Texas Tech didn't close out on the shooter, and he's wide open and drains it. All of a sudden, we go from a 3-point game to a tie. Jerome, still had 25 seconds left, could have easily just knocked it down to 1 and played the foul game. They would have got another chance. So I thought that was very gutsy. It changed the tone, of course. And then, one thing I do want to bring up is the call that happened with about 50 seconds left in overtime. The game was still in the balance. I think Virginia might have been up by 4, possibly even 2. And the ball was swiped out of bounds pretty cleanly, like you would see in any other basketball game. But this basketball game just happened to have the best cameras I've ever seen in a basketball game, and they somehow catch the ball just barely touching the Texas Tech player's pinky, and they're like, that's evidence that it's off him. And it's like, clearly the guy who swiped it from Virginia, it was just a clean swipe. So I think they overanalyzed that, and that really cost Texas Tech, because after that, Virginia was able to leverage that next possession and start putting the game away.
Well, I'll tell you what. The other thing I saw, though, that I think we got to bring up here is Kyle Guy almost cost them the game by trying to call a timeout there right at the end of regulation.
Yeah.
Virginia gets the ball back with with 2 seconds left, and Kyle Guy, instead of receiving the pass, turns to the referee to call timeout. Ball goes out of bounds. Texas Tech gets one final possession, block shot, and they go overtime. But
and that's because it's a two-part process, because part one, you have to call the timeout, and part two, the ref has to acknowledge the timeout.
Well, there wasn't possession when he was calling timeout. It was bouncing towards him and out of bounds. It was the right call.
Yeah, that was a bit of a miscommunication. Really, nobody's fault there. Fortunately, at least for Virginia, not for Texas Tech, it ended up not costing them the game. But he thought his teammate had the ball. He went to call timeout, and his teammate passed it to him as he was doing that, and the ball just went right out of bounds. I didn't notice that had happened until I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was watching the game with a bunch of people, and none of it. Well, one woman actually saw what had happened and explained to it, and then sure enough, when they showed the replay, but yeah, another one of those bizarre moments.
Well, I want to run through each of you here. I want to ask the question now that the tournament is done. It was I think we said it was kind of weak in the early rounds, great when we got to the Elite Eight and onwards here. But let me start with you, Tytel. What was the biggest, most memorable moment from the entire tournament? Do you have one?
I think I don't, just because there were so many moments. I mean, to see a game decided at the end by a guy down by 2 making 3 free throws in the final seconds, like, I know it wasn't the title game, but just the clutchness of Virginia the whole way, between Diakité's shot against Purdue to send it to overtime, Guy's free throws, Hunter's 3, like Virginia's clutchness in general, but specifically with Guy on the free throw line at the end of the semifinal.
Matt, do you have any other really memorable moments from this entire event?
Yeah, I got to go Carson Edwards' performance throughout the tournament. And I basically watched 3 of the 4 games, the Villanova, the Tennessee, and the Virginia one. That man made himself a whole lot of money, I think. And just the way he was hitting shots, I'm used to sort of seeing that because my guy Marcus Howard at Marquette kind of does the same thing. But Edwards, man, he did it on an even bigger stage. And what a showing for him, even in the losing effort. I mean, to win the most outstanding player on the regional for a losing team, you don't see that too often, and it was well-deserved.
I'll say one other moment that I have that I still keep looking back at, it would have turned the complexion of the entire tournament around, was that Auburn-New Mexico State game in the first round, David.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I was going to talk about. I won't say it's the most indelible moment, but it's one of those that was big at the time that kind of got lost in the shuffle as the tournament progressed. But it really was. New Mexico State, it's not that just that they had a chance to win. It's that they were in a situation to where they should have won the game. I think they were, what was it, down 2 or down 1 with 3 free throws, and they missed 2 out of the 3.
They're down 2.
Yeah, okay, down 2. They had a chance to win. They missed 2 out of the 3 free throws. Were down 1, got the ball back, had another chance to win, and this all followed them passing on a layup that would have sent the game into overtime to try and win the game with a 3. They ended up with 3 chances to either win or go to overtime, and they missed all 3. That's how close New Mexico State was to knocking off Auburn, and none of this ever happens if that occurs. And I thought at the time, I can't remember if I tweeted this or said this to somebody else, that I thought that was one of the biggest gut-punching losses of the tournament. There were other ones, Tennessee losing to Purdue the way they did, Purdue losing to Virginia the way they did. But I thought what was particular about this one is that this was sort of a program, not season-defining, but programming-defining win for New Mexico State. Whereas Tennessee, Purdue, their programs are already pretty well defined. Not that those weren't big games and heartbreaking losses, but New Mexico State would have probably gone to a place that they haven't been to in a really, really long time. I didn't think we'd see another one like that until we saw Auburn lose to Virginia in the Final Four the way they did.
Well, I said, Auburn tried to give them the game. I watched last minute. I couldn't believe what was going on.
Rocco, any other moments during this tournament?
Well, I think just the 4 Elite Eight games, I think that will always be a memory, how great they were. And like we talked about last week, that's going to be right up there with 2005 is the best I think any of us have seen. I was also going to mention New Mexico State. I just think it's interesting how Auburn survived a horrible 3-shot foul in that round, only to lose with a horrible 3-shot foul to end them in the Final Four, how that all came full circle for them. Yeah, so mainly those moments. Of course, the Purdue Tennessee game was unbelievable. The Purdue Virginia game was unbelievable, and a few others. But yeah, I'm pretty much sharing a lot of the same memories that you guys have mentioned.
Slika, you got any others we haven't mentioned, or we cover them all?
Well, the game that we've suddenly forgotten now is Virginia Gardner-Webb, because this was almost like a sequel to a horror movie when you consider that Gardner-Webb had jumped out to a 14-point lead before Virginia finally woke up out of their coma. They only trailed by 6 at halftime and ended up being a blowout by Virginia standards at the end of that one. So they looked a lot more relieved when they were playing against Oklahoma and even to a lesser extent Oregon before they started walking the tightrope of Purdue and then Auburn and Texas Tech.
I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and pull this down here. I do want to discuss a few other things, though. First of all, Virginia is not the only team that ended the season by cutting down the nets as a champion. We actually ended up with 4 champions.
Texas declared themselves the national champions.
Texas declared themselves the national champions. Well, Titel, how about that? How about Texas Longhorns winning the NIT, knocking off a surprising Lipscomb team in the championship game?
So, I mean, is this from the same marketing firm that brought you UCF as the national football champion a couple of years ago? I mean,
No, that one was actually plausible. Not that it wasn't ridiculous, but it was plausible. They were unbeaten, and they beat the team that beat the national champion.
that will teach me to open up that can of worms again. So, I mean, beating Lipscomb is great. Winning the NIT is great. Congratulations on being the 69th best team in America. Props to Shaka for overcoming obstacles. He had Kerwin Roach, seemed like was suspended every other week. Got Andrew Jones, who has like leukemia and a leg and a knee injury. Like, I'm just glad these guys could get there. It's going to be a shame if they lose Jackson Hayes to the draft. I hear he's a potential lottery pick, so he's probably gone. But as a freshman, he was one of the best defenders in the Big 12. So if they bring everybody back, they are going to be a turning team next year.
Another team that celebrated a tournament championship 10 of the year, Matt. South Florida over DePaul. We're amazed that DePaul was playing April basketball this year.
Well, hey, at least they basically made the most of. You've played the CBI, at least try to win it, and they put a good effort into win it. I mean, they made it to the best of 3 finals, and
won a game there, lost the game 2, lost the. Was they win the overtime game? They won the overtime game. That was the
yeah. The one thing about the CBI, the 2 games at DePaul, and I know that they were on campus in the much smaller facility. There were actually people there at a DePaul basketball game
in April.
And it actually looked close to full too.
Yeah.
There was an appropriately sized court for
It was
them.
pretty full. Well, what's that, Matt?
It was an appropriately sized court for them, I think. Even the Allstate Arena, the Wintrust, a little too big. The Little McGrath Arena, which actually I've been to, it's a nice little arena on campus. But
we also saw a championship to Marshall in the CIT. David, they kind of rolled through that event too. I don't think they really sweated much in any of the games they played.
No, they didn't. Real impressive. I mean, we like the CIT. I think we like it, at least I do, better than the CBI. I kind of like the spirit of it, and I kind of like it that it's not run by the Gazelle Group. But a real impressive showing for Marshall, and they were hot and cold during the year. I think we were expecting a little more out of them than what we saw for most of the year, but we definitely kind of saw it at the CIT.
I think from a historical note, it was actually the first time since 1947 that Marshall actually won a postseason tournament. Back then, they won the NAIA National Championship game.
I wouldn't have known that they ever won one.
Well, they won the national championship. If the CIT was the national
they won
championship.
the college the national champion Marshall Thundering.
You guys have been following the CIT probably closer than anybody ever since its inception.
Oh yeah, I enjoy it. Most people laugh when I tell them this. There have been years, not the last 1 or 2, where I DVR'd the Elite Eight so I could watch the CIT.
I just have a quick question. Has anybody had a draw as easy as Marshall did? Because they had 4 home games, 2 against the Big South and 2 against the Horizon League.
Well, it comes down to, Rocco, the fact that Marshall paid a little more money, because that's That's how you
Right,
get
right.
games in these events.
Yeah.
It's a nice draw.
Not
It's
to
a nice
mention they
draw.
also got a bye in the second round for that reason.
That's right.
Also, probably for more money. But on that note, though, well, here we go. Rocco, watch you. While I got you, you had a chance to go to one of my favorite new events that we've had 2 years in a row now at the Final Four, the 3x3U National Championship. Ton of fun again.
Oh, it was amazing. I had a blast. It's nonstop action. You get 10-minute games or first to 21. Most of the time it's first to 21. And then next thing you know, the next two teams are warming up, and within about 5 minutes they're playing. And it just keeps flowing and flowing. It's hard to even keep track of stats or anything. So you just got to sit back and enjoy the games. I got set up courtside on Friday, which was really cool because once a couple games got going, a team would finish, and then they didn't have there was really no room in there at the Mall of America.
Yeah, it's a little crammed in there.
Oh, it was so cramped. I don't even know how the fans stayed longer than 2 games because you just have to stand there on the side if you didn't have a credential. So the players would come and sit by us in the media, and I ended up hanging out with Javon Bess and Tremaine Isabel, who's actually a Seattle guy, both from St. Louis, on the Atlantic 10 team, and got to talk to them for a couple hours. It was great. And just little things like that. I talked to Frankie Ferrari for about 10 minutes. The games were amazing. That team from the CAA ended up winning it. And I think the key is, to win this thing, you need to have a couple of guards. One of them's got to be really fast. The other one's got to be able to shoot. And on the CAA team, they actually had 3 with Pushitsa, Wright Foreman, who was the MVP of the whole tournament.
He was great in the tournament, yeah.
Yeah, and Devontae Kaycock, along with Brantley as a powerhouse down low. That was just like a dream team. And a lot of people picked them to win it, and sure enough, they did. But it was awesome to watch that thing.
That was a ton of fun. And I guess we have to mention briefly Titel. I don't know if you had a chance to catch the women's championship game, but while it looked like it was a blowout, could be most of the game, it actually ended up being a great finish between Baylor and Notre Dame.
As with the semis, not so much the Baylor win, but the Notre Dame-UConn game was also fantastic. Arike Ogunbowale, the tourney MOP last year, had a chance to tie the game in the final seconds, and she missed the first free throw and then tried to miss but made the second free throw, and then Baylor's ran out the clock. She's a great player, obviously. She was the player of the tournament last March. She had a chance to get in very rare air if she would have converted the free throws and helped her team win the title in overtime. There's only 5 men and 5 women all time who've ever won back-to-back tourney MOP awards. We're talking legends like Cheryl Miller, Lou Alcindor, Bill Walton, etc. So it's a shame she couldn't get into that stratosphere, but still an impressive career.
But by the same token, Baylor was also able to win it for Lauren Cox, who actually went out with what appeared to be a horrific injury. Thankfully, not an ACL tear, but my understanding is it's just an MCL sprain. So she was at least able to celebrate with her teammates once they finished off their national title.
I guess let's kind of start looking a little bit towards next season here, because there's been a lot of coaching changes and a lot of coaching news.
Yes.
Including
And can I start off here, Chad?
David, why don't you start things off on the coaching front?
On coaching, as we all know, Tim Miles resigned from Nebraska. He decided to take on other opportunities, better opportunities. So you kind of feel bad that they lost him. UCLA, he did not accept that job. Kind of a shame. I think that had he gone there, he would have been the most iconic coach they'd ever had, taken them to success that they've never known. And you kind of hate for UCLA that he decided to do something else. But what the? I thought we were talking about the coaches.
Let's actually talk about the actual coaching changes instead of David's whatever's going on with Tim Miles. But let's start with the news today, though. And Salika, you're our Cincinnati guy. Mick Cronin leaving Cincinnati, going to UCLA.
I almost get the feeling from what I'm hearing from UC fans is there's going to be a mix of disappointment that he finally is going to be moving on, but there's also going to be a section of the fan probably going to be relieved that he's actually moving on, because the second round seemed to be his ceiling. But UCLA, it actually is going to be somewhat for them, where they at least get a more defensive-oriented coach. We'll see how well he's able to recruit out west.
Well, yeah, Tytel and Rocco, you're both Pac-12 guys. He's one of 3 new coaches now, along with Mark Fox at Cal and Kyle Smith at Washington State. What are your thoughts, Tytel? Let me start with you on the changes in the Pac-12 coaching tree there. Coaching.
I'm hoping that's all the changes we have for the foreseeable future in Pac-12. I don't know. I really thought Sean Miller would be gone last year, but obviously he has survived, and now that he has the #1 recruiting class, he's got a whole bunch of reasons to stick around. I think Kyle Smith will have an uphill battle. I understand going from an Ivy League school to a West Coast Conference school to a Pac-12 school is a vertical rise, and he's a good coach. But I think I don't think Ernie Kent left a very full cupboard. I think Cronin will just be depending on who leaves and who we can bring in for recruiting purposes. It's a very big job with a lot of spotlight on it, but I know he's a good coach, and I think that if he gets talent there, which he should be able to attract, then he can get it done. Mark Fox at Cal, another thing where the cupboard is bare, so good luck to him. I've seen some preseason picks already, which is ridiculous because it's still April, but people think Oregon and the Huskies and my Wildcats are all going to be like in a top 20. I don't think so, but the fact that people are like on board, like maybe it could happen. Who knows?
Right.
Rocco, you want to run away in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, looking at the talent coming in. Arizona's got the #1 recruiting class as we speak. If they can hold things together, that will maintain. And they've got some really nice pieces coming in, as John knows. The Huskies as well. Isaiah Stewart is going to be a player that we've never really seen come out of Seattle. Might be the most dominant center in the nation next year. So that's going to be really fun to watch from a Husky perspective. Oregon's got a loaded class as well and an impact transfer. So I suspect Luke King will go pro, but they should still be pretty tough. So, hopefully, especially given the way things went this last year and even the year before, we can at least put 4 teams in the tournament, perhaps 5. We'll see how that plays out.
Well, Matt, let me bring you in here on another coach news because you're one of our Big East guys. And Chris Mullen technically resigns from St. John's today. Word I'm hearing is more forced out, but whatever way you want to hear it, surprising.
No, yes and no. Because it's funny. Like the end of his era there kind of mirrored the Steve Lavin one, where came into fanfare, showed some promise, especially in recruiting early on, and their last teams are tournament teams. But afterwards, it was looking bare. Like because I said, Shamori Pond's already declared for the draft. Justin Simon's moving on, and beyond those two, Marvin Clark was a senior. So Alzey Figueroa isn't a half bad player, but it was going to be a pretty bare cupboard. So.
And Matt,
good move. Now, the one is I'm hoping they can correspond with doing that by bringing Bobby Hurley back out to the East Coast.
Well, one of 2 days up here, I heard Bobby Hurley. I'm here a little interest from Rick Pitino.
Oh, what about Tim Cluse?
Tim Cluse.
No, I actually have an interesting fact that Cluse makes sense, but he transferred from St. John's to Hofstra. And so since then, Luke Carnesecca, despite being almost 100 years old, still has some sway with that program. So I can see that alone might be why Cluse would not get the job. He's more likely to maybe get Seton Hall in a year or two if Mullen moves on.
I don't. This is so you're hearing he was forced out. Are you hearing that maybe he just didn't want to do it anymore?
I'm hearing as much as anybody else is hearing. I don't have any type of inside information.
Well, another thing that really hurt St. John's was when who was it, Abdul Massa, who was the lead assistant under Mullen and their lead recruiter. He actually went to Nebraska's staff once Fred Hoiberg took the job there. So you take out Mullen's recruiting pipeline, and that was
literally the only guy on the staff that went on the road. Like it was for modern day basketball, knowing how it works, that was sad to see. You had a 4-person staff, and Abdul Masi was the only one that recruited.
Yeah, and in general, and this is in general. This isn't directed at Chris Mullen. I think a lot of people that enter college basketball, Division I college basketball, after having not been at Div 1 or having been in the NBA or whatever, are almost overwhelmed by how much work it is. I mean, the NBA is a lot of work, but you're pretty much just worried about basketball, whereas in college you're worried about recruiting, and the scouting's harder because there's 300 teams instead of 30. You have to build your staff. There's eligibility to worry about. You get guys committed, and sometimes they don't come. You get guys that do come that look to transfer, and I think that that we've seen, in Fred Hoiberg in particular, a great college coach. When he initially left, he just said he didn't want to coach in college anymore. He couldn't stand all the extra work. Now he's back in college, but this isn't the first time we've seen someone enter the D1 level that had not come from the D1 level that didn't stick around, if that's why he left.
I'll tell you what, while we're on the coaching front, Titel, let me bring you back in here because we can't talk coaching changes and not talk about the SEC, where we now have Nate Oates coming into Alabama, Eric Musselman in Arkansas, Buzz Williams going from Vatech to A&M, and Jerry Stackhouse taking over in Vanderbilt.
Nice little lineup. I'd like to get Stackhouse on the court as a player. I'm still not sure how he's going to do as a coach, but obviously with these days of guys like Mullen and Ewing and all the former superstars, Hardaway getting into the coaching biz in college, maybe he can attract big-time recruits. God knows Penny did, as we'll find out when James Wiseman takes the court in Memphis in the fall. I was a little surprised that Buzz left. I don't know if it was a money thing, but, like, he obviously had a good thing going at Virginia Tech. I got to see it in person in D.C. a couple weeks ago. Musselman had a very good thing going in Nevada. I assume that was a money thing and a bigger conference thing. Notes, it was too hot. Like, he's kicking butt at Buffalo. He's getting into the tournament. He's beating teams like Arizona State. So, like, he's got to strike while the iron is hot. And the sad thing for Oates is that I think, like, all the Alabama – I think Tyra Lewis is staying, but, like, Ingram, Petty, like, all of them are gone.
Petty's staying too.
Okay, so that's something. But I don't think he's going to win 25 games next year, I guess, is my point.
Right. Well, I guess in the fallout from – we got to look at the fallout from that also. Rocco, one of the fallouts there with Buzz out at Vatech, they make a real interesting hire bringing over Mike Young.
Love that hire. Wow.
Yeah, I agree with David. I think, he deserves the opportunity. They were outstanding, and he built that team over time. They had an outstanding team the year before this when they knocked off North Carolina, almost got into the tournament last year. So it's probably it's not going to be the big splash like a Jerry Stackhouse where all of a sudden they're going to have 2 or 3 5-stars on the roster. He's going to do it his way, and probably by the third year they'll be really tough. I think next year and the next year after might be a little bit of growing pains, but if he can keep some of the guys on board from what they built with Buzz, maybe they can get into the tournament next year. We'll see.
Can we cue up the tweet? It was the greatest tweet.
Oh, yeah, it was.
Mike Young. Can somebody dig
No, I don't have. You have to tell me about it. Yeah, unless you have it ready. You got to prepare for these shows, David.
Yeah, I know. I'm not prepared for the show. Somebody tried. It essentially said that how he was going to sit back and eat and drink all day and make his staff do all the work. And
yes, but this was, of course, Michael Young, the ex-Texas Rangers baseball player, not Mike Young.
Right. It was awesome.
But
it was fabulous.
Real quick, so a few other points here on the coaching news. A couple other names here at UNLV, new head coach, and TJ Elsenberger coming over from South Dakota State. And we also got to mention Rod Hunter, of course, going to Tulane from Georgia State.
Yeah, Hunter is going to be interesting because Georgia State apparently did not want to pony up to extend him. So at the end of the day, I think Georgia State also hires Rob Lanier off of Rick Barnes' staff from Tennessee to take over from them. I'll be curious to see what Otzelberger is able to do at UNLV, and also be curious to see who Nevada ends up hiring, because there are some rumors that Steve Alford may actually surface with the Wolfpack.
Wow, that would be interesting. I guess on that note, though, that covers everything I have on my list for tonight's show. And I think we should run through everybody here for final thoughts, not only on the night, but on the entire 2018-19 season. And Matt, let me start off with you.
Well, I would say just in general, looking forward to next year. You're seeing all the preseason rankings out. That's nice. Well, let's see them in about a month or two once all the player movements done. I unfortunately, mine is one of them for Marquette. If Marcus Howard stays, I think top 10 to 15 expectations are legit next year. If he goes, I think the Marquette will be a tournament team, but there goes the hopes, I think, of Final Fours of that. So that's just my personal. But a lot of other teams, you see that, where if guys stay, they don't transfer, all that. Even like Alabama, look at that. Like now that Oates has kept Petty and Kira Lewis, I think they're actually be really good next year because Oates is a fabulous coach.
Good point there. Salika.
I think one of the running jokes while UCLA ended up hiring Mick Cronin was you probably could have held an exempt tournament with teams and coaches that ended up saying no to that job, whether it was John Calipari in Kentucky, Rick Barnes at Tennessee, Jamie Dixon at TCU, and I'm sure there's a few others I'm missing. But the other thing I'll be curious to see what happens is what's going to happen later this month when I think it's Will Wade and Sean Miller are actually supposed to take a deposition. So we'll have to see what their coaching status is going to be in the next couple of months as the FBI case continues to fall out.
Well, I guess when I mentioned a Sean Miller title, let me run over to you next.
Thanks, buddy. On a personal note, the things I'm going to remember sadly about the past season was from an Arizona side, they were 13-4 in mid-January and then finished by losing 11 of their final 15. By far the worst season I've seen in decades as an Arizona fan and a proud alum. For Penn, obviously, as you guys have made mention many times, sweeping the Big Five and then not making the NCAA tournament.
Never happened
I
before.
can hang my hat on the Villanova and Temple wins. And, of course, sad to see Fran Dunphy leave, but certainly not our best effort. As far as what I'm going to remember from the past week, getting to go with a Hoops HD press pass to the East Regional was one of the highlights of my life so far. I hope to get to do many similar things in the future. As a lover of the sport, I love every April when they announce the College Basketball Hall of Famers inductees, especially because they inducted Coach Lute Olson again this year, but also guys who I remember seeing growing up. Shane Battier, it seemed like he could do a little of everything in the court. Calbert Cheney, one of the best scorers in Indiana history. Larry Johnson, who was like Zion Williamson, not exactly, but like he was just unstoppable on the court, inside and outside, with so much speed and power. So great to see some legends of the game finally getting their deserved due.
Oh, great point, and you're absolutely correct. I know you've had some interviews also, and I know you probably have a few more coming up, so keep an eye on the site for those. Rocco.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic year, Chad. I think, just looking back on the year, the Huskies finally broke their 7-year drought of getting in, so that was a key checkbox. Very nice bonus to get out of the first round as well. I thought it was a memorable champion where Virginia really they were tested in every game except for maybe the second round one against Oklahoma. Of course, being down 14 against Gardner-Webb, and then all the other games after that were tight. So pretty interesting to see a team go all the way through the 6 wins, with 5 of them being, they had to sweat. And then I also thought this year's Final Four, in a time where college basketball, the nature of the game is always shifting. We're at a point now where a lot of the elite coaches and the people with the most resources, such as Duke, Kentucky, etc., are going for the one-and-done type players. But the teams that actually got to the Final Four were the more veteran, experienced rosters, and they outlasted those teams in the Elite Eight, such as Duke and Kentucky, as I aforementioned. We also have, for me personally, it was a great opportunity to see a lot of new arenas this year and a lot of new conferences. Really unique opportunity that I got to have this year, and just can't wait to keep building on that. And then looking ahead, I think, we've got 6 big job opportunities still out there, at least 3 big ones: Nevada, Cincinnati, St. John's. But let's not forget about BYU still out there, Belmont still out there, and Wofford's out there now. So be really interested to see how those play out.
I actually want to add one further thought to what Rocco said. We talk about pursuit of one-and-dones, but now we have to talk about pursuit of graduate transfers. When you look at a program like Texas Tech that has certainly profited, there is some rumblings that they may be changing the rules.
Right. Yeah, that's something we're going to pay attention to here. There is some talk about changing the graduate transfer rules. The one and done could be going away here in a couple of years also. So we're going to see a lot of changing landscape over the next few years even.
One and dones aren't going away. People are still going to play 1 year and leave. It's not like nobody ever did that before we had this.
Yeah. Well, true. Yeah. Well, David, any other final thoughts from you?
Yeah, it's just looking back, I kind of always do this towards the end of the season. I kind of look back at the way things were at the beginning, and it's kind of weird doing this with Hoops HD. I mean, I think without it, we'd all watch college basketball, but this is sort of a vehicle to make us feel like we're more involved in it. We need to be more involved than just watching games, and it's kind of fun every day, even as early as October when the preseason games are going on. You sort of have something waiting for you every day. There's a write-up to do, or a podcast to do, or a conference preview to read, or what's going on in the day's games, and it almost takes a minute once the season's over to not be around you guys every day. It's wonderful. I don't like
This is nice not to be around you every day,
yeah,
David.
it's
Yes, it is.
nice being around, but it's just I mean, looking back to that first night where we had the 2 top 10 matchups, it just seemed like this year and last year too, it started off with a big ball of fire and never let up from the big games between highly ranked teams the first week to the exempt tournaments all the way through. There was never kind of a down spot, and it's just fun doing it every day. I do kind of miss having this and having something waiting for you every morning or every night. So that's going to suck. But the other thing is, to build on what Rocco said, one of the great things about this game in this sport at Division I college basketball, Texas Tech, if you go back and look at it, did not receive a single AP preseason top 25 vote. So you don't know what's going to happen. And that's what makes it so great.
It was another great tournament. And I guess on that note, I do want to thank everybody for joining us for this great season. On behalf of David Griggs, John Stalika, John Titel, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org, Matt Sikowski, Chad Sherwood. Again, thanks for joining us for this season. And just want to end by showing you that we have now beginning. We have started our countdown. There's 219 days left to the start of the season. And we're all looking forward to the Final Four in Atlanta next year. Forget about what happened in Minneapolis. It's over. Atlanta's next. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
In May, I think. Maybe, yeah.
In May? Okay, we'll see you again sometime in May.